it's always wonderful to talk about these games with other people that understand what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
When we drove down to Pittsburgh, we stopped at customs and the guy said, "What's the purpose of your visit?" And it's really hard to explain to somebody that has no idea what
right.
what the game is, And I said, okay, it's really hard for me to explain. We're going to play in a baseball tournament, but we're not going to be actually playing baseball. It's a tabletop game. You know what Stratomatic is? And he's looking at me. His eyes are glazed over. And he says, "Enjoy your trip."
All right. Do I have to declare my boxes of cards or whatever? Oh my goodness.
I guess he saw that we were kind of geeky people, and he said, just go.
There's no danger to anyone, I guess.
No.
Possibly. I don't know. Until the dice start rolling and those bad rolls start coming up, and oh man, forget it.
Right now, I'm in a league of guys that are around, I guess, in Illinois and in Wisconsin, and just guys I met through the tournament and stuff.
Oh.
And just fantastic guys. Eric Berg is one of them, and some other guys as well. But I've been bad. I've been delinquent in my game playing because I have so little time to actually play games. And we play 3-game series, and where each of us has a home game, and then I guess it's we roll the dice. That's what we do to determine who gets the 2 games at home and the 1 game away.
Gotcha.
But I've been delinquent. Because I've been working so much, and yesterday was the first time I actually got a chance to go outside and play golf.
Oh geez.
In this year, because the golf course is only opened like 3 weeks ago.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because of COVID, I have to get back and play the rest of my games that I owe these guys. In football, you play every play.
Right.
In baseball, you don't play every pitch. You don't roll every pitch. You roll every play. So the batter's up there basically for 1 pitch, and you roll the dice, and he's either out or he gets a hit, or he gets a walk or something like that.
Right.
But in football, the football game takes longer to play because you have to roll every play.
Right.
And I remember I got the 1990 card set, and you can't play them with the 79 set that I have because the boards are different.
Right.
And they changed, so I had to get new boards and stuff. And we played the Giants Bills Super Bowl.
Sure.
And I'm glad my son has patience, because it took us about 4.5 or 5 hours to play 1 game.
Wow.
Because the new boards, I was totally unfamiliar with them.
Sure.
And just trying to find everything and hoping that I was playing it right, because I wasn't exactly 100% sure. But it was fun. I think the Giants won that game. It was a low score though. Both defenses were spectacular.
Right. Interesting, but true to the outcome.
Wide right.
Yeah. Oh man, long suffering Bills.
Yeah, but you know what? That Bills team, to be able to go to 4 Super Bowls in a row, just to go to 4 Super Bowls in a row. I mean, just it's an accomplishment, and I think it's one that is underestimated or undervalued.
Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, it's like that's no mean feat to get there and get there and get there. That's the same with the Vikings in the 70s. It's like, just getting over that hump. But
if the Bills had won that first one, who knows how the course of their history would have changed.
True. Yeah.
They may not have been as hungry to get back to more after that first one.
Interesting too.
The Super Bowl champion hangover that exists, and it does exist.
Oh yeah.
Because you put in so much effort and so much of your time and so much concentration, so much focus just to try to get there. And then when you win, it's like this massive release of just anxiety and stress and everything.
Right.
And to go through that again, it's like you almost don't want to put your brain and your body through that again.
Right. Which is what makes Brady so just like, wow. That's
incredible. And I know he has haters. I can't hate him.
No.
I have too much respect for everything that he's done.
And he's not done yet.
He's not done yet.
It's like, man.
I was sad to see Drew Brees retire because I was hoping that he would get another one.
Yeah. That's
when we lived in Seattle, he was playing for Purdue, and they met Washington in the Rose Bowl, and Washington was number 3 in the country that year.
Wow.
Which is amazing to me that Washington could be number 3 in the country in football.
Yeah.
But they had a really good team that year. Marcus Tuiasosopo was their quarterback, but he was like more of a, at that time, the RPOs were not used in football the way they are today. And but he was a run pass option quarterback, and that was not seen as the pro game. That was seen as the college game, or a game for not, that's a kid's game. That's not right. But it's amazing how the game of football has changed in the 20 years since.
Yeah, well, if they brought all that kind of collegiate aspect, the pistol and the kinds of things like that.
Yeah, it's true. Well, because they've inserted these college quarterbacks in the game so quickly now, because they have to take advantage of their narrow window where they make so little money, so they can stock up the team around them. So they have to tailor their offenses toward the quarterbacks that come out of college. They have to. If they inserted their old-fashioned pro style offenses, these poor kids they'd be gone. They'd be lost. I was talking to a guy a couple of weeks ago in an interview. Actually, he's a host on SiriusXM's NHL Network channel.
All right, yeah.
And he's an avid massive CFL fan. But he was saying that the influence of the Canadian Football League, it's had an influence on the game in the NFL as well, because there with all the movement and with all the different formations in the CFL, we're seeing a lot of the same things done now in the NFL, with the run pass option, because run pass option has always been a part, at least the last 35, 40 years in the CFL.
Oh, interesting.
Mouse Davis, I think, brought it up to Canada to the Argos, Toronto Argos, I want to say in the 70s. And, and he everybody started using it then. The Canadian Football League, and I should have mentioned this before too, because the Canadian Football League, one of the things that coaches always have to work with is that there's a ratio that has to be honored of Canadian players to American players. And so teams basically are only as good as the Canadian players that they have. But it also takes, like I said, it takes American players about a year and a half to acclimatize to the bigger field, the motion, all of the 12 men on the field, all that stuff. So they are two different games. They're both football. They're two different games. One has 3 downs, one has 4 downs. One has a big field, one has a narrower field. One has a rule on punt returns that you have to give the guy 5 yards to get the ball before you can encroach on that. Whereas in the NFL, it's the poor guys are every man for themselves. Different things, but they're both football. And up here, there's a big debate. Either you love the NFL or you love the CFL. You can't love both. I disagree. I think you can love both. You can enjoy both. And one of the coolest things was when we were in Pittsburgh, in the hotel room, watching ESPN, watching a game between the Calgary Stampeders and the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And in our hotel room out in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, we're sitting there, and the 50-50 draw is going like up and up and up and up. It's like $300,000, $400,000 at a football game. And my son says to me, "Dad, we have to go to a game in Saskatchewan next year." I said, "Yeah, I want that 50-50 draw too."
The end zones are 20 yards?
They used to be 25, but they're 20 now. Yeah.
Okay, right.
They went to 20 because stadiums that had running tracks on the outside, they could only accommodate a 20-yard field, or 20-yard end zone, sorry, as opposed to the 25. And so at one time it was 25, and that deep end zone, that creates a lot more opportunity to open up your playbook and do different things. Because if you're on the 5-yard line with a 10-yard end zone, you have a very limited number of plays you can run, fake into the line, bootleg, and maybe throw something to a tight end or something. But if you're on the 5-yard line in the Canadian Football League and you've got 20 yards to play with, guys can do hooks and curls and a whole different receiving tree than they could on a 10-yard end zone.
It's going to make your red zone offense a whole. I mean, if you're on the 1 yard line or the half-inch line, I mean, you
Yes.
can, it's like
Yes,
crazy.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things when we went to my son and I went to the 2016 Grey Cup here in Toronto, and it was Ottawa and Calgary, and it was my beloved Ottawa football team. They hadn't won a Grey Cup since 1976, so it was 40 years.
Wow.
And they're playing Calgary, and they won it in overtime. But our seats were on about the 5 yard line on the west side, and we could see, when the teams were doing their goal line offense right in front of us, you could see trying to set up there. Calgary was trying to set up that run to the wide side to try and seal off the corner so the guy could get in, but they couldn't get in, and they ended up having to kick a field goal. And I hope my son was able to absorb that. I should have poked him and said, watch this, because this is really cool and important. But it was something that I picked up on watching it right away. And it was just amazing to me how Ottawa was able to seal that off and not allow Calgary to get around that end.
You've got to have, I imagine. I mean, you talk about 3-4 defenses and as the linebacking in the NFL evolved, you've got that lateral kind of, I mean, even if you go back to the cover 2 with Lambert and the Steelers and the ability to drop him because he's a light guy and 20 yards down the field. But I mean, you've got to have, I wonder has there been any comparison speed wise?
Well, linebackers in the CFL have to be, they can't be giant men. I had a friend who was a linebacker for Ottawa and Toronto in the 70s and early 80s. And you'd look at him, you'd think he was an accountant. Seriously, he was tall, but he was narrow. But you have to have mobility. You have to be fast because you have to be able to cover, guys coming out all over everywhere, all over the field. And it's a passing game. The CFL is more of a passing game because it's 3 downs. You have 2 downs to get your first down, as opposed to 3 downs to get your first down, like in the NFL. And so it's more of a passing league. When Doug Flutie came up here with all the movement and his ability to scramble and his ability to move, it opened up. I think it opened up his game to himself. I think he didn't realize how much he could do on that big field with all the movement and with 12 guys. And I mean, he threw for more yards in a short period of time than anybody else has, and I think he's one of the greatest quarterbacks that ever played in the CFL. He's not a typical drop back quarterback, and you can't be a typical drop back quarterback to play in the CFL. It requires a different skill set, a little bit of a different skill set, and that's kind of something that I think a lot of people kind of don't acknowledge, or they gloss over when they're talking about whether the CFL is a quality game or not. It's a different game, and it requires different types of players to play the game. Vince Ferragamo came up to the CFL after he had gone to the Super Bowl with the Rams in the 79 into the January of 80 season. And Billy White Shoes Johnson came up and played in Montreal as well.
Nice. Yeah.
And neither of those guys really had much success, though, because it's a different game and it requires different skills, slightly different skills than you would see. The athletes, they're no less proficient, they're no less athletic than they would be, than the athletes in the NFL would be, but they're different athletes. They're slightly different athletes. You can't be a 320 pound guy if you're gonna as a pulling guard on the run play on the CFL field, because you'll die about, like, by the time you get to the far hash mark, basically. It's you have to be a narrower guy, and same with defensive linemen, because you have so much movement and you have a wider field, and the running backs can get out that farther corner. The defensive linemen have to be quicker, and they have to be as strong, but there's not necessarily that 3 yards in a cloud of dust, let's close that gap kind of mentality. So it's a little bit different. It's still, I still love it. I love the game. I love everything about it. I love both games, actually, but I think I think the CFL game is a better game to watch live. I think because you're seeing so much action happening all the time on every play, there's so much to see, and it's so much more to see live, I think, than there is in the NFL game.
Interesting.
George Will talked about football. Loves baseball, but he talked about football as being violence punctuated by committee meetings. With all the TV timeouts and everything else in the NFL game, there's a lot of time where you're sitting there in the stands and not doing anything, or except getting a beer, from the guy that's walking up and down the stairs there. But they are different games. I love both games, and I think it's possible to love both games. And I know that there are people here in Toronto who want Toronto to get an NFL team. And we tried the Bills in Toronto series, but they teamed up with Rogers, which is one of the massive communications companies here. And they figured, wow, it's Toronto, we can charge whatever we want. Well, they realized they couldn't charge whatever they want because consumers are somewhat discerning. And they had to end up having to give away a lot of tickets for free because people wouldn't spend, hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go see one football game.
How do you think Tebow would have done, Tim Tebow, in the?
That is an interesting question. I think he probably would have been very, very good in the CFL. I mean, he wasn't terrible in the NFL. You look at his time with Denver when they beat Pittsburgh in that playoff game.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's all right.
But
that's a great play.
It was.
Incredible. His jersey's in the Hall of Fame because of that.
Yeah. I mean, will he be a tight end? Will he be able to be a tight end this year with Jacksonville? That's a good question too.
Yeah.
If he can do that, if he can transition to that and be successful doing that, that would be spectacular.
It'd be awesome. Yeah. I mean,
I'm not a big Tim Tebow fan, but looking at looking at his abilities and his skills and what he's done, his accomplishments, it would be a spectacular thing if he was able to succeed as a tight end in Jacksonville.
And probably sell a few APBA too.
Yeah.
Right?
That would be interesting to see his card there. Yes.
Right.
But I don't think he's going to play a lot though. I don't think he's going to get a lot of time on the field, but he might be the Taysom Hill guy, that kind of player. It may be able to insert him at quarterback for the odd play here and there and do something with that.
Bring back that wildcat kind of a thing or whatever.
Yeah, because he can throw out of that formation too. You must have read about 3 Bricks Shy of a Load, Roy Blount's book. I was not a Steelers fan at all until I read that book, and I really became a fan of each of the individual guys because it's written almost like a diary kind of a form. And just the stories about some of the stories about the guys in training camp and stuff like that they're hilarious. And of course you can understand guys kind of try to break curfew and get out of training camp to go enjoy themselves, in the town that they're wherever they're in, that kind of thing. It's just, I love those little stories about that kind of thing. But just the Terry Bradshaw story and, how people thought he was kind of not a very bright guy, but he ended up being, the one of the best quarterbacks of all time. And his ability, not just, he didn't throw for a lot of yards necessarily, but just his attitude and his ability combined with his attitude made him just such an amazing guy. His story on a football life was just,
I was just watching that.
I was in tears at the end of, just watching that. It was spectacular.
This is obviously the Hall of Fame. When we held our tournament there in 2013, his locker, just is still there, and Lambert's helmet is there, and also Tebow's jersey. But yeah, I mean, it's and talk again about statistics and the kind of understanding what the team is about. Those, if you look at the 74 Steelers set versus that 78-79, when the Chuck rule, the Mel Blount rule came in, they opened it up, 16 games, opened the air war. He had Bradshaw's, suddenly gunning people down with this Swan Stallworth. I mean, those guys are really, talk about greatest show on turf, but he doesn't get that credit because of the earlier stumbles, and he did mature and grow.
Yes, he did. That's the thing. And isn't that what it's all about too? the personal stories are always more compelling than just numbers. And so when you see a story like Bradshaw getting drafted or getting, joining the Steelers, and then Hanratty coming in and taking and then taking over, and then Bradshaw coming back, and just the ups and downs of an athlete's life, uh, it's so, those stories are more compelling than the numbers, always, 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 always.
For sure.
And just seeing what Bradshaw was able to do when he came back from all that adversity, and then seeing the way he suffered with injury in his last season, and it's it's a Greek tragedy almost.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, just, those are the stories that I love. Those are the stories that I if I could write them, I would love to write them. Those are the things that just I live for, those kind of things, those kind of stories, those kind of just the whole tale, the whole narrative, everything, just the way it goes up and down, and the way it just finishes itself.
No, for sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Those compelling, larger than life stories are just, if you could make them up, it'd be amazing. But Jim Plunkett, same thing. Poor Joe Namath and his, injuries, and Gale Sayers and his injuries.
Oh, Gale Sayers. Oh my God. Yeah. But Joe Namath, I mean, he was hobbled before he even got out of college.
Yeah.
What he was able to do with those Jets in 68, 69. It's fascinating. It's awesome. And it's fascinating to me. And I think that's why he will always be that one of those characters in the lore of sport that we will always remember. At least those of us of a certain age will always remember.
That Super Bowl III is a legendary moment for all sports, because
it brought the AFL into relevance, and it made all people who were NFL only stand up and take notice, and have to admit that the AFL is not bad. Then the Kansas City Chiefs win the year after that and confirm what the Jets did the year before. It changed the landscape of football, because then there was the merger between the two leagues, and you had then Monday Night Football and everything else, and everything just explodes from there.
And of course, Shula then goes and wins two for the AFC.
Yeah. I have the DVDs of the first 40 Super Bowls with John Facenda doing the beginning, John Facenda's voice, on a cold, dark day in New Orleans, Louisiana, when the men of steel from Pittsburgh met the men of iron from Minnesota, two young field generals, Francis Tarkenton and Terry Bradshaw, led their men into battle. And it's just, it's just so awesome.
And you talk about marketing. I mean, the music of NFL films, the angles. I mean, those guys, they talk about selling the game. I mean, really.
How lucky were the Sables to be able to walk into that situation and just take over that and just do it.
Yeah. What has been the take with the CFL in terms of competition? I mean, it's a far more wide open game is what it's sounding like. I just want, because, in the NFL, the 4 downs, they added the 2-point conversion a while ago, and the overtime rules where they didn't want the sudden death, and they opening up, the offense have been opened up so much. I just wonder do they have the same kind of competition committee drama with the CFL as the NFL, or are they pretty well set for what they have the game dialed in to be?
No, we never had the angst that we see in the NFL all the time. We had the 2-point conversion when I was a kid in the 60s. Nice. You could always do that. You could always have that option to do that if you wanted to. But we had ties until recently as well, and then they adopted more of the college kind of overtime. To see the Grey Cup decided in overtime in that way in 2016. It was nerve-wracking and spectacular to have it happen in the Grey Cup game, in the national championship game. But The right team won, thank goodness. But that I don't think we've ever had the same kind of angst and the same kind of nervousness, or the same kind of pearl clutching that I've seen exist, around the NFL game.
What about the injuries situation, concussions and the like?
Oh, it's all similar. That's all the same.
All.
Yeah, I remember seeing a guy break his femur, in a game, had to be carried, and just it was terrible. And I mean, you break your femur, that's life threatening, because it's one of the large lead vessels runs through your femur.
Right.
Just to see that, that was something. But concussions are a big part of the game here as well, and it's they're part of sport, I think, really. I mean, I played hockey. I was a goalie for 40 plus years. I'm sure I've had a couple, probably. You get shot in the head, and it comes out through a screen. You don't see it. Boom. I probably got a couple myself. But I have a friend of mine who played for Hamilton and for Ottawa. He's donating his brain to, I guess is it Boston University that does the CTE research. And,
right.
I've talked to him about that. I brought it up in an interview one time with him, and he says, "Why do you want to talk about that?" I said, because it's very relevant. I think it's because it's a very important topic.
Right.
When you talk about football, football is such a, really, it is a brutal game. It's a brutal game. I remember watching the NFL Today one time, and they were talking about, this is back in, I think it was in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And they were talking about, if you want to understand what it's like to play football, put on about 6 or 7 big coats, put a helmet on your head, and run into your garage door about 40, 50 times every Sunday for about 6 months. Do that for 4 years and see how your body feels and see how your head feels. And it was kind of a silly way to describe it, but it's very apt as well. And it's pretty accurate in terms of the way that guys' bodies get treated, and they just, the punishment that they go through every week, and the guys whose careers last longer than 4 or 5 years, how much damage are they doing to their bodies? And I mean, I know personally, my hip, I was a goalie, and the goalie, your hips, your knees, your core, everything, you're putting pressure on and it's just a repetitive stress all the time. It wore the top of my femur down to the point where it was exposing the nerve endings and the blood vessels. My left leg was 2 centimeters shorter than my right leg. The surgeon told me that. I didn't realize that. I mean, I'd been feeling discomfort for a long time, but until the x-rays went to the doctor and then went to the surgeon, and I had no idea that the damage that I'd been doing to my own body was that bad. And that's not from people hitting me. That's just from my own bodily, my own movements, my own, the movements that a goalie makes are not natural a lot of the times. And so it's just natural wear and tear if you're playing for that long. Imagine what these football players are doing to their knees, their ankles, their hips, their shoulders, their arms, their heads, over that period of time. It's got to take a toll.
Well, and now, you talk about, again, going back to that 3 brick shot of a load era or paper line or whatever. I mean, those early, when I was talking about this with someone else about how, it used to be that you weren't a pro. I mean, you'd play pro football and then you'd go sell cars for half the year. You're not being groomed from Pee-wee football all the way through the NFL combine, and you're on the NFL network. I mean, that's all you're doing. I mean,
they had to have that second job because the money back then was not that great. Right. It wasn't like it is today. Right. It wasn't like it is today, and you had guys making, if you remember Jim Bouton's book Ball 4, they were making $7,000 a year. $10,000 a year, and they lived in the suburbs like everybody else did, and in a normal house, in a normal neighborhood, and drove to the games with other players, and it wasn't the money wasn't like it is today. So they had to have that second job selling cars in the off season, or doing whatever they were doing in the off season.
Right.
It was a different time and a different game. Uh, Thankfully for the players, and I will never begrudge anybody from getting whatever money they can get.
Sure.
You know,
Sorry.
thankfully for the players, they're able to make that money now, and they're able to, if their bodies are broken down at the end of their 20s. Can you imagine that at the end of their 20s?
Wow. Yeah.
Their body can be broken down and just not able to play anymore. That they hopefully they've been able to put some of the money aside and to live on for the rest of their lives.
Mhm.
Just it's just I think that's what people just assume. Get back out there and play. Stop being a baby, get out and play. But it's the damage that these guys do to their bodies is real, and it can be devastating.